Hello, welcome back. So let's compare super zooms as far as image quality goes. Unscientific test, but I get asked a lot of questions on which one's the sharpest, image quality, is it worth upgrading, let's say from an FC80 or to the A1000 versus the SX740. So kind of did an experiment. I didn't want to put the cameras on a tripod and do the traditional resolution test. I wanted to test them kind of real world handheld against two different subjects for the most part and see where things lie. And as far as the cameras I want to test, or simply going from the APS-C sensor, the Sigma 150 to 600 with the M200 24 megapixel, the 100 to 400 Olympus EM5 Mark III, and I also have another lens, the 100 to 300, that we compare with the 2-time multiplier on both these digitals. Got the SX70 HS, which is new and pretty impressed with this. We have, of course, the Nikon P1000, over there the Nikon P950, and Blackmagic camera 4K, or I should say 6K. So we got all these cameras. I want to do an image comparison between resolution and ideal conditions. So max zoom, ISO 100, I really wanted to stretch out the zoom to see what the resolution of the lenses are and try to get a feeling for what are we getting as far as image quality versus a very expensive micro four thirds or a really big lens 150 to 600 with a 24 APS-C sensor. What are we seeing the differences versus these small point and shoots, which is like a 960 millimeter and 840 millimeter? What is it worth upgrading, or is it worth switching over in that? So let's get into it. Now, if we look at the original shot, I'm trying to shoot or photograph a deck with a bolt on it. So this is pretty far away. Actually, it's probably further away than I would shoot or photograph a bird at, but I really want to kind of stress test the lens, see what kind of resolution we can get on reading the bolt. So here you'll first see the 960 or the SX740, and we can kind of go ahead and look at the crop or the actual photograph from the Nikon. Very similar as far as zoom capabilities from the two, so you don't get a whole lot. But let's take a look at actually zoomed in. Now we've cropped in a fair amount, and you can see pretty close. These images really look almost identical. You could say one is sharper and the other one maybe has a little bit more resolution, but these were both shot at ISO 100, max zoom, f-stop 6.9, and yeah, it looks surprisingly similar for the the lens and the zoom capabilities of these. So you guys have to be the judge of this. I did some screen crops here, see what you think, and I would call it a wash. You know, the colors, and looking at the actual how we actually took the pictures, there's probably 20 photos from each camera at the subject that we're shooting. So I took the sharpest photo of each of these cameras and compared it and kind of wrapped it into a comparison. So we pretty much know I did get a sharp image. You know, after 20 shots of rotating these in and out, you're going to see, you know, there's some that had some mistakes in it, and that's the reason why I really just cycled through about 120 photos total to get the 6 or 7 that was the sharpest on that subject, and then we're going to pair it against each other. So let's look at the P1000, P950, SX70. Now, 1365 zoom for the Canon, 2000 zoom for the Nikon 950, and a whopping 3000 zoom for the Nikon P1000. And if we compare them here, just take a look here. Yeah, it's we zoomed in quite a bit for the Canon. We zoomed in a little less for the 950, and of course a lot less for the P1000, but we still had to zoom in to get that bolt. Now, this is really stressing these systems, the lenses, and if you look side by side, to me the Nikon P950 kind of looks the sharpest, but you know, out of 20 photos each, so it's about 30 photos handheld using this, all max you know, I should say the aperture for the P1000 was f8, and the 950 and SH I think are 6.5. ISO 100 again, pretty clean image, good light. This is a lighting condition that I would definitely shoot birds in. It's the golden hour. It's not too dark. I'm getting away with ISO 100. You guys can be the judge of this. Which one do you feel is the sharpest? It was a little surprising that the P1000 wasn't sharper, but again, I'm not having to crop in very much for the P1000 compared to the other images. Now, there's ways around this. So let's say the P950 or the Canon SH, we can use some expansion to get it back up to 16 megapixels or 20 megapixels using, I think, Topaz, and that you really won't notice the difference there. So again, it's a wash. So let's go against some bigger APS-C cameras, or I should say the Micro Four Thirds. Now this is where it gets interesting. I took the 950, 2000 millimeters, because that looked pretty sharp, and I put it up against the 100 to 400 with the 2x teleconverter. Now the 2x teleconverter, when it's shot at ISO 200, is very sharp. I really don't notice a difference between the image quality. And we took a photo there. You'll notice how much it's cropped in. Then we used the 100 to 300 Panasonic and used 2x teleconverter. We actually zoomed in with the Black Magic camera with the 150 to 600 SIG. It's not color graded, so it looks a little bit off. But if we look at the images here, same spot, again, lowest ISO, man, they look really close. If I had to say anything, the P950 and the 300 millimeter are the sharpest. A little surprising the 400 didn't come in sharper. But again, any of these showstoppers, anything, you know, no, it's extremely similar in the image quality, what you're getting, again, in golden light and that. But let's go against the bigger sensor. So we have a 24 megapixel camera here with the 150 to 600. And if we look at that, the M200 off to the right, I shot it in a little bit different lighting conditions. I had to, but I lowered down the ISO substantially. And you'll notice it looks really similar somewhere in between them all. You know, so that's 960 millimeter equivalent on this big camera with a 24 megapixel sensor. Now this is the stuff you find in the Canon 80D, 90D. This is what you can expect against point and shoots or a Micro Four Thirds camera. Yeah, it's pretty much a wash with regards to this. Now you got to remember, these are the lenses that were shooting these birds here. Like the Micro Four Thirds, we shot this shot. We shot this shot again with the Micro Four Thirds. It's plenty sharp. And just a week before here, the Sparrow with the M200, 150, 600, it's tack sharp. So there's really, you can't say the lenses aren't sharp. It's really stressing them in the lighting conditions and at full zoom, the resolution of the lens and all that. So let's compare the 100 to 300 against the SX740 and the Nikon A1000. I was surprised at this. So the Panasonic 100 to 300 looked a little better than the 100 to 400 with the zoom. And so we do a comparison here. And again, really close on the specs. You could say one is better than the other. It's how you look. I'm happy with any of them, but there's nothing that's just totally walking away with the image quality like I thought it would be. I thought that the Micro Four Thirds or the APS-C might have some definite advantages, but I've never really compared all these in one sitting and seeing what the actual image quality is. So very surprised that the SX740 and A1000 did as well as it did. I mean, 840, 900, 60 versus 800, really close, 16, 20 megapixel cameras. So here's the situation. Here's the second subject. I did not use the point and shoots because at this point, this pot is very far away. And I thought that it just wouldn't be a challenge. Why waste my time? I really expected these little cameras to have a significantly worse image quality versus these other cameras that I didn't even really want to waste my time. So I'm going to put these aside, and I was wrong, by the way, that they really held up quite well. So we'll go with the coffee, or the actual planting pot over here. That's about 1.5 yards away. Again, way further than I'd normally photograph animals from, like birds or anything like that. So we have the Panasonic zoom 800 millimeters. That gives you a rough estimate. And then we do a zoom. So the zoom is the 1600 millimeter equivalent with a 2x teleconverter. You can see where it's going. We have the SX70 at 1365 millimeters. You can see how it compares. And when we look at what the Nikon P1000 950, even more zoom, and then the 3000 millimeter P1000. Substantial here. So we look at the results. What do we see? Again, not a lot of difference. You could say the SH70 is a little sharper, or the P950 has a little bit more resolution. But yeah, it is surprisingly close. So much so that I had some other images that from the Blackmagic and the M200, I didn't even bother putting it in. So here's the situation you kind of run into. What does it say? Really, it kind of comes down to the biggest changes that I found from images were from the same camera itself in my technique. In excellent lighting, with the ISO way down, all these cameras look pretty close. You're going to be able to get photos. Now, there's some other extremes. You could say low light. Well, APS-C sensor, micro four thirds is going to walk away with it, because I know for certain just from today, testing the SX70, ISO 400 and more on JPEG, is the noise is just insanely, it's pretty high. But it still does well. You can't really zoom in and do that. So the thing about this is, if you look at the images, things can change, hour by hour, minute by minute. If the sun ducks behind a cloud, things get dark and your ISO has to jump up to 1600, you're going to be hurting with some of these smaller cameras, definitely. Here's the case. Here's last week's video, me talking outside with the iPhone, small sensor, and notice I really like the image quality out of it. It was sharp, noise-free. 5 minutes later, I go inside, roughly the same settings, automatic, everything, and I did this. I did this part, and immediately, it was a couple days later, I found this and started processing it, and I was shocked at how much the noise affected the video when I was inside. And so looking at that, I was almost unusable. So knowing the limitations of the camera, but generally you want to get in favorable conditions to really make the camera shine anyway. If you're going to shoot in absolute dark, even APS-C sensor or a Blackmagic camera is not going to dig you out of a lot of hurt with noise and that. But seeing this, the questions, you might save yourself some money. You probably set your expectations accordingly as far as upgrading from a point and shoot to another point and shoot. You're not going to gain a lot when things are done. It's the performance aspects that really nowadays are costing some serious money, where you're talking 10, 40, 60 frames a second, autofocus, all these other things, full frame sensor, super low light, but then that comes with the bigger glass. All in all, I was very impressed with the small sensor cameras against the micro four thirds. I'll be honest, this is, we showed you the Canon S40 or 740 SX or whatever it is, and then the micro four thirds. This is a $400 camera. This is probably close to $3,000, and the image quality looks extremely close for that kind of situation. And yeah, but in low light, there is no contest. You're going to go with the bigger sensor, and frames per second, buffer, autofocus, all these things. I just want to see overall the best conditions, what these cameras could do. And it surprised me a little bit that the sensor, small sensor camera, can do so well. Anyway, guys, look at the photos here. Look at it again. You got comments, questions, concerns, let me know. I'll answer them down there, and hopefully I will see you guys next week.